This session provides general information only and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It is not personal advice. Views expressed may not reflect NetWealth's, and NetWealth may receive fees for products discussed. Please seek professional advice before acting.
So we have a very, very strong footprint around about the 12% mark of the professional advisors in the industry today.
I think we can probably do a little bit of work as advisors and advice firms to just sort of simplify things and take a step back. Unpack it all.
You have these family office principals. Every generation, eventually, the principal changes.
The operations role is much more tactical as opposed to somebody who can handle and ensure really the execution of the firm's growth strategy.
Hi, and welcome to Between Meetings with Matt Heine. In this podcast series, NetWealth CEO and Managing Director chats to industry leaders and innovators with local and global expertise. They discuss the latest technologies, business models, and demographic changes, as well as leadership lessons and trends that are impacting financial services. We hope you enjoy their unique insights.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Between Meetings. I'm delighted today to have Sharon McClafferty join us from Slipstream Consulting. Hey, Sharon.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Good. It's actually quite amazing that having now moved past 100 episodes that we haven't had a chat yet.
I don't think so. It's an absolute honour to be here, but I can't pause without saying to anyone listening who has not listened to that 100th episode, listen to this one first, but then straight after this one, go to that 100th episode. It's a rare podcast that I wanted it to go longer. I could have listened to it again. It definitely needs to be on people's list if they haven't heard it.
Oh, thank you very much. A few people have sort of commented on it, and as I responded at the time, it was one that I think both Dad and I were hesitant to do for some time, but it was a great one. It was good to sit down and sort of reminisce on a lot of the history.
I think we need a part 2 before the 200th episode, please.
All right, that might take me another 100 episodes to get the courage up again. You've had a fascinating career, which started off in corporate access. Well, probably started well before then, but probably your first proper job was in corporate access. Love to hear just a bit about your history and how you've ended up doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, I moved to London at 21, and my dream as a child, I'm on film as a 4-year-old, saying that I want to work for the big 8. So, I mean, that was probably conditioned into me. My first job in London was at Deloitte. And so I got a maternity contract there and just really enjoyed that year. But it was one of those moments where, maybe don't meet your heroes. So there were 12,000 people working at Deloitte UK. And within about 4 days, I'd worked out maybe 3,000 of them were contributing to profit. I thought I was going to be surrounded by exclusively ambitious and really clever humans. And they were there, but it wasn't quite the business of my dreams. And I was going to leave London, and my flatmate didn't want me to leave. And she sent me this job for a Scandinavian investment bank. And not to go too deep, but I was an exchange student at 17 in Stockholm. So I spoke Swedish, and I had no rights to get that job. They were just really desperate, and it was before the GFC, and they needed someone to sit in that seat. And I do think that having Deloitte on my resume very much helped. They're like, well, if she can do that, she can do this. So they were actually asking for 3 to 5 years experience on a trading floor, and I had none. And anyway, I ended up in a corporate access role, and I stayed there for the better part of 5 years. And I think that's kind of dog years. So it's 20 years of actual work. And during those years, I had about 3 years before the GFC, which was fantastic. And all of the movies about that time of investment banking are true. And then the GFC hit. And the parties, I have to tell you, Matt, just really took a dive. Like, not only did the markets take a dive, my social life and the caliber of events. I went from, I organized an investor trip that was a private plane to the Arctic Circle, where we raced performance cars on an ice lake that a track had been done in this ice lake. So the same people we flew private the next year in the GSE, we took the same group of people bowling. So quite an adjustment.
It must have been a fascinating time, though, to be in London and to see that up front and personal. But when you tell stories like that, and I'm sure there's 100 more, are you surprised we ended up where we did?
Yeah, okay, fine. Are you saying I'm part of the problem?
No, not at all.
No, so it was a massive amount of excess. It was this moment in time where I just happened to be in Paternoster Square in London with Goldman Sachs was our next door neighbour, and seeing, 30, 40% of the workforce getting cut. maybe that experience is something that I'll relive.
I hope not. But interesting that you said, though, at the age 4, you'd stood up and said you wanted to work for the big 8. Is that because your mother was an auditor and she was your hero at the time? And then maybe as a follow-on question, was the Scandinavian bank really where you fell in love with fin services?
My father was a partner of EY and he was an auditor. He drilled it into me. It was like, although I think he would have been horrified, he'd passed away by the time I worked there, but he would have been horrified that I wasn't a fee earner, which is the only option. But I probably fell in love with, I've never worked outside of fin services really, not in a real job. So I couldn't imagine abandoning, 25 years of experience in the space. But honestly, I actually think I was raised in a family where one of the parents was a partner of an accounting firm, and the pros and cons of that stress and that reality as a kid is probably where my original passion came from, because now I help owners of financial advice and accounting firms avoid some of the mistakes that were made there.
Which is interesting, because I think probably one of those moments for you was when you were trying to balance sort of corporate access, corporate life, and being a mum, and were struggling to really, I guess, manage either of them particularly well.
I left the bank, which I loved. I loved every minute of that job. I had my passport at my desk. I had clothes at my desk because I could be in Helsinki that afternoon. That was unbeknownst to me. But I left that job because I wanted to become a mum, and it was just absolutely incompatible. So I moved back to Australia with the goal of finding someone and starting a family, which is what happened.
Yeah. And then how did you get into your current role? Was it always your ambition sort of through that period once sort of you came back to own your own business, or was it something that you fell into?
I never once thought about owning my own business. And probably because in London, I'm working with large cap companies. I'm not working with business owners. It's like I had no business owners in my life for 5 or 6 years in London. Came back to Australia. I worked for a business coaching business here. So my ambition when I got back to Australia was to wear jeans 5 days a week. So I just really didn't want to have a big corporate career. Ended up working for a business coach who shut down his business to be a tech entrepreneur. And then the clients were saying to me, who should I use? And I just had my first baby. And so I was on maternity leave with a newborn. And I thought, I'll call around. I'll do due diligence. I quite like that stuff. In my DNA is the daughter of an auditor. So I was like, show me the evidence. Like, I don't want a written client case study that doesn't have financial data in it. The bank was a research bank. I've never read anything without financial data in it. So the idea that I was really underwhelmed by the options available to financial services in coaching. I hold the professions in high esteem, and I believed at the time that they deserved a professional option. And the thing that annoyed me was that the options available hadn't run their own firm. So they hadn't sat in the seat and run their firm and sold their firm. And I thought, well, I wouldn't want a coach who hasn't done the thing. So the foundation story of Slipstream is just my frustration. One, collect financial data from day one. Like, I don't want to hear you good, show me you good. And the second thing is all of the coaches have to have owned, operated, and successfully exited their own firms, which does mean that half of my team are independently wealthy people who never need to work again. But luckily, they want to give back to the professions that gave them so much. And I've convinced them that they're going to get really bored if they don't work somewhere. So we make it a really nice option and a nice life. But yeah, I never intended to start a business. Like, the business was started because it needed to exist. It was almost like I thought it was insulting that there wasn't an option that looked like a consulting business. So the other thing that I guess has transpired that I didn't think about at the time is that multi-coach model. So it's not just like, we've got one hero consultant or one guy who's the guru. Like, we've got 6, soon to be 7, who have all met the standard. And so that has actually played out much better than, our original business plan would have said.
Presumably when you started the business, there would have been primarily practice managers working with the sort of the banks and the institutions as coaches. There wouldn't have been a lot of independent parties in the market at that time.
Yes. So the PDM, and I've met some really clever PDMs who have, I would argue at the time, I would have been a PDM level. Hence why I've never been a coach at Slipstream, and I never will be a coach at Slipstream. And you might be really, really clever, but is it your house on the line? Have you hired and fired? So that accountability piece, which is actually really important, is a lot easier if your coach is sat in your seat.
So how many coaches have you got working in the business today?
So there's 6 now. And it is the hardest part of this business is finding that caliber of person, because as I said, they don't need to work ever again. And so not only do they have to have the demeanor of a coach, there's a fair amount of EQ required to be a coach. So you've had to have sold your own business. So it's very hard to find. That's the hardest part of this business. And for several years, we had to stall growth because I refused to change. I refused to lower the bar. Like, our brand is pretty good. We get incredible results. And so I wasn't really willing to risk the results on that. And so I sit here quite smugly. We've done years of work and I have 3 really good options in my coaching pipeline. So I have a much bigger pipeline of future coaches, but like 3 short-term options that, I would hire today. So that isn't something that we've had previously. And about half of our new coaches now will come from our client base. One of our new coaches was a client for 6 years. And when we called him to say, hey, we think you'd make a great coach, he said, I've been expecting this call, but I thought it would happen in 10 years' time. And he actually sold out of his firm in order to become a coach. He's like, it's my dream job. We helped those guys get from it's a multidisciplinary accounting financial planning firm. We helped them get from about 2 mil to 8. And he said, I can kind of predict what's happening now. And I don't think I'm as excited about the 8 to 15 journey. He's like, I just want to help a whole bunch of people do exactly what we've done over the last 6 years. And so, yeah, we were a bit shocked that his answer to that phone call is, oh, yeah. And he's within 3 weeks of that phone call, he'd sold out of his own firm to be a coach. I think it's been very hard to find coaches, and it should get easier because we've been in business for 11 years.
I love the fact that you call them coaches as well as the background, which I think is really important. Have you seen a shift in the industry as far as the type of practices or the people that are seeking you out looking for help? Because if you think even about the last 10, 15, 20 years, the sort of the nature of the industry and the people in it has changed quite a lot. Putting your hand up in that initial phase and saying, actually, I need help, I want to coach, quite a big move for a lot of practices.
Yeah, I always say no one, we very rarely onboard new clients who are looking for a coach. So they're either looking for one of
the valley of despair.
Yeah. So our clients are simply dissatisfied with the present. So they're either, wanting to move away from whatever problem that they've got now, low profitability, or they're working too hard, or there's this impending succession issue that they know is a little difficult without a third party involved. So it's either like, I've got a problem, or I've been drifting, as in, I don't want the next 5 years to look like the last 5 years. And then the other side are, just very ambitious. And they're like, we just believe that it's going to be faster with you than without you, which is really, our main value for capable, ambitious people is, we'll get done in 2.5 years what would have taken you 6. So, but no one's looking for a coach. And coaching has the worst, we're below real estate agents. We've got the worst name in the market. It's completely unregulated. So that's the only thing, the idea that my dream was to work in the big 8 and I've found myself in business coaching. It's not quite the same, but the difference in terms of who's approaching us over the 10 years, larger firms are coming to us now. Previously, I was actually turning away firms that were, say, 8 mil plus. We were always in that 0.5 mil to 8 mil space. We are now in the, say, 800K to 25 mil space. And one of our new clients is doing, the client he's about to say is doing 40 mil. And the way that that's transpired, I just kept saying, listen, no, it's not us. We don't have enough evidence at your size. And then I had a great firm who you do know say to me, okay, great. If it's not you, then can you refer us? And so once again, I go, no, I can't. There's not a lot of people between us and Accenture or Boston Consulting. It's a big gap between there. And what we've found working with the sort of 10 to 25 mil firms is the projects are really similar. What changes is the leverage. If you do a pricing project at a 2 mil firm versus a pricing project at a 12 mil firm, just the numbers. And then I always get caught up in, revenue and profit and look at these changes year on year. And I've often forgotten about asset value. It is insane. So, when you go we pretty much double profit in 3 years, and it's pretty standard. Double revenue and triple profit for a small firm. And maybe that's not quite the same. Larger firms might move a bit slower. They often have succession planning and equity transitions kind of happening, but it's the same projects.
Always say the same problems, just more zeros.
Yeah, and more politics and potentially more complexity. There's more grey areas, like who's in charge of this? Well, these three people, and you're like, no. So yeah, I feel like without an external person asking hard questions, you can drift along as a big firm. One of our values is to be bold, which sounds like sort of quite corporate, but that actually translates to ask the question that will get us fired. I want to go in and ask the question that will get us fired, because I never want to be the consultant that kind of borrows your watch to tell the time, right? Like, I want to be the people that come in and say, hey, there's a massive elephant in the room. Shall we talk about that now or later? And we have been fired in the first meeting, and that's okay. Years later, I've had people call me and go, I'm ready to do the thing that you told us to do 3 years ago. Can we get started? You know, we walk in and we say, hey, you need to fire your dad. We can't work on a profit improvement project and ignore the fact you're paying your dad $200K to not like to turn up half a day a week and disrupt your team. So for me, that is just hypocrisy to walk in and not label, hey, we've got a quick win for you. It's not going to be pleasant, and some of those, there's like lots of versions of that. And I think it's unfortunate that no one else has walked in and said that thing.
I know you're very evidence-based and you've got an incredible data set now. What does good look like in your mind? What are you seeing good in the industry? And what does great look like in the next sort of 3 to 5 years? Where do you think the industry can go? And happy to open that as wide as you like. So EBITDA margins, profit. Love to hear some of your thoughts around the sort of the financials.
Thank you so much for that question, because I think this year I've maybe thought that my role in the industries that we service is to show people what good looks like. Like, I have so many conversations with people going, oh no, we're pretty good. And I look at their numbers going, compared to what? Like, who are you benchmarking against? So, you know, that fly with, run with chickens and you'll cluck and fly with eagles, like who you're benchmarking against is a very, very big deal. If I take one step back, we look at all of our firms who you would say are successful and good. They have 3 systems that are all working. And 2 out of 3 can be really bad. So the first system is they know who their ideal client is and they can find them. So they only work with ideal clients. That is marketing, conversion, the whole thing, identifying who they are. The second thing... That
can often be quite challenging, though. When people sort of say my ideal client, it can be anyone that fogs up a mirror. So how have you seen that actually come to life in practice?
We do this work all the time. And I think some of the fear is people don't want to say out loud who they like working with because it means that their entire legacy book does not look like that. So
hard question.
Yeah. So by answering that question, I have now snookered myself into this corner where that's not the client base I have. So we try and actually take a bit of that fear away and just go like, who are your favorite clients? And great. And now who are your profitable clients? And it's that concentric circles model of going, okay, who are your really profitable clients? Who are your favorite clients? Who do you think you add the most value to? Like, we'll do that work. And just, there's so many things that we do that we go, ignore the current client base. Like, let's just do it in theory, hypothetically. So, I sometimes ask people, if you could choose one client that I could replicate 100 times and your business was based on that one client, who are they? Now, a few people that we had this conversation to tell me some sort of passion project. Like, I want to do aged care. I'm really passionate about aged care. I'm like, great. That's not a profit project though. So I think about that's a passion project, and you can earn the right to do a passion project. You build a really good business that pumps out 35 to 40% EBIT, and you build time in your schedule and go your hardest on your passion project. But it's that order. You build the business first, which is the ticket to the game of your passion project. So occasionally when I hear ideal client, I hear, passion projects, not profit projects. So yes, the first system is ideal client. The second system is they know and can articulate their value pricing, right? So it sounds easy, but that is one thing I think lots of people are really questioning their value out there. And I think we're in a purple patch, like economics 101. There is not a lot of supply and there is a lot of demand. Not knowing your value right now in this moment is really expensive. I had a call the other day with a lady she's like, my largest client pays $8,000, ongoing. And then I found out it was inclusive of GST. I was like, okay, so welcome to business. Let's talk about exclusive of GST. Like, let's start there. I said, tell me about the client. She said, well, they've got like about 6 mil and then they've got these other complexities. And I said, where have you come up with this number? And she said, I I don't think I'll ever charge more than that. That's probably the limit to which I feel comfortable charging. And I think, wow. So that like know and articulate your value, that's completely missing there. So if you're thinking about a good business, they work with ideal clients and they know and can articulate their value. And then the final system is they can get the right work on the right desk. So if you work with ideal clients and you can price them well, but it revolves around you as the owner, well, guess what? You don't get any freedom. You might make a lot of money, but it's just a large, high-paying job. Like it's a job. It relies on you. So being able to get the right work on the right desk, it goes to scale, profitability, reducing stress, all those things. So if you have those three systems working, we can largely achieve whatever your personal objectives are. So what sort of money do you want to make? What sort of freedom do you want to have? What sort of impact do you want to have? What sort of legacy on this team? If you have those three systems working, then you have a lot of optionality in the type of business you want to build. But 2 out of 3 can be a really scary place. Like I was talking to a guy who has ideal clients, well, sort of ideal. He's scared of all of them, but they're big. Like average fund per client is significant. He can get the right work on the right desk. So it's really efficient. And he can't price them. So effectively, I think he turns over about 1.8. I reckon he's actually running a $4 million firm. And so he can't he has to be efficient because he can't afford the resources because he hasn't priced them properly. And they're the guys who burn out.
Negative spiral.
Oh, it's horrible. And the industry loses them. Like the profession loses fantastic advisors because they've underpriced for so long that they're just burnt out. So I sometimes see businesses where I go, 2 out of 3, I'd almost rather none.
Funny you say that. I've certainly seen that across the industry. And because as the dollars get bigger, it gets very hard for them to justify. I can't charge that person $100,000 on a $20 or $30 million account. But they're sitting at 0.4, whatever it might be.
Imagine a world where wealth technology is simplified. NetWealth is continually investing in new tools and platform features to optimize your staff productivity and to give you and your clients the best user experience. With our managed accounts functionality, bring new efficiency and scale to your investment operations. A world of technology awaits. Discover it at netwealth.com.au/woo.
Question for you. So I think that's a really interesting way to think about the systems, and we'll come back to the financials in a moment. Those last two are going through major shifts from what we're seeing. So the value proposition, and we're seeing this through the adoption of managed accounts and MDAs, has gone very quickly in many ways from an investment proposition for many advisors where they pick and choose managed funds and shares to a strategic consultant and financial coach. Are you seeing a lot of shift there, and has that been a difficult migration? And then on the getting the work on the right desks, clearly that is the biggest area that's being disrupted at the moment with offshoring, outsourcing and AI. So it's almost going back to the drawing board for firms on those two items.
Yes. So I think that the value proposition has been changing for a long time. If you think about it, like we've worked with a few firms who thought they were stockbrokers. And we kind of have to go in and go, oh, hey, guess what? And, they were giving the advice for free because, it was just you get this along with my stockbroking ability. So that transition of like, what job are you in is changing and has always been changing. So yeah, that is one of the benefits, I think, of hanging out with ambitious people who are not afraid of change and innovation. Because we have a new client who thinks about this really differently, like very much financial coach, very much concierge, almost to the point where he's questioning whether he needs the license, right? And then he comes into our client base and everyone's like, oh, I'm not sure about that's a bit risky. They'll see something, they'll go, well, we're going to take 20% of that. Like we're going to move, 20% towards that way. Or so, yeah, I think now is not the time to be siloed. One of my coaches read this book about isolated white tribes. And now he's like, now's the time not to be an isolated white tribe. The org chart piece, like right work on right desk, is, I think, moving quicker now than it's ever moved. We cannot predict the future. So the way we've always done org charts, and it wasn't for this moment in time, but it does work in this moment in time, is once again, let's do it in a hypothetical. So we're not going to talk about Susie's role or Janine needing to leave. We are going to talk about what business do you want to build? Okay, so you want to go from 2 mil to 5 mil in 3 years' time. So what does the 2029 org chart need to look like to deliver 5 mil, this many clients at this much average spend at this sort of service level? Let's just do that in theory. So now what we have is we know what our org chart needs to look like in 3 years' time. Every time someone leaves or there is a change, we're not just replacing that role. We are saying, okay, this is an opportunity to hire in line with the 2029 org chart. So we're not scrambling and going, oh, we need to replace this role. It's like, wait, because we're going there. So we need someone who's capable of that journey. But then the other thing with, AI and offshoring, and I think those two things are going to come in massive conflict and are today. So we've just come out of, one of my coaches did a 2-day session with one of our firms on this issue, and they've got a large offshoring team and they're very tech forward. It's a really confronting thing, but the wrong thing to do is not confront it. So the worst thing you can do is just drift and go, that's really hard, so we'll deal with that later. And that's just leaking profitability, leaking opportunities. We prefer be bold, confront the thing. So when we do org charts, we don't put any names on them. There's only roles. So we're not talking about we need to get Margaret from here to here. We're just saying we need someone who's capable of doing this. So there's no names in there. And it is about just getting the right work on the right desk. And when we do that work, it's really interesting what you see in an org chart if you marry it up with the client mix. So people are holding on to these tail of clients who are unprofitable. Those clients are often serviced by the team members who, in an ideal world, the business owner doesn't want on the org chart. And you're like, oh, I've got a solution for you. How about you sell the tail? And you could sell the tail with the team. Someone could think that's an acqui-hire. Bingo, you go from 6% profit to 40. So sometimes it's not, a lot of what we do, particularly with ongoing firms, is incremental. But sometimes it is just one big decision changes your life and your business. And you're holding on to this massive tail thinking, well, one day there'll be gold in the hills. Like in the meantime, that holding cost is huge and you've just not quantified it. Yeah, so you can see we love this stuff. We love the numbers.
With the roles, I think that's a really fascinating way to look at it, and sort of building that org chart up from the ground. And as you say, it'll be completely wrong in 2 or 3 years. One of the things that we're thinking sort of quite deeply about is moving away from roles, and it's actually what are the tasks that need to be done, because a traditional role may not actually exist in the next 2 years, and it's as more and more tasks either get automated by AI or can be sent offshore. Have you started breaking it down to that level with any of your customers?
We've almost always broken it down to the task level. So in order to get the right work on the right desk, those tasks need to be chunked down. So the issue we've come up against for 10 years is people do think in roles or much bigger tasks. And then you go, well, no, 90% of this can be done by someone else. And that is, so true in that advisor role. One of our coaches ran his business with a metric of 60% of his advisor's time needed to be either face-to-face with clients or on the phone. So emails didn't count. And the rest of the business was about running interference. So everything that wasn't face-to-face with an advisor, with a client or on the phone was up for grabs. And how do we chunk it down into the smallest things so the advisors didn't have to do it? Now, when we look at new firms that we work with, face-to-face time with a client or on the phone with a client might represent less than 20% of an advisor's time. So absolutely chunking things down into the smallest possible task, I think was always a good idea. And it's a better idea now than ever. That's even more meaningful now because you're not just delegating it, you can automate it.
Before we move on to AI, good firms on a EBITDA margin today and where they're heading?
So we think we can get all of our firms over 35%. Over 35% EBITDA, it's almost up to them. The gentleman we were talking about earlier, he wants more. So lots of people that we work with are in that 45. I think our highest is 54.5, but over 35, they have to want it because you have to make decisions in line with that extra sort of 10 to 15%. But we have got lots of firms in that mid to high 40s. We think it should be going higher. So whereas we've always set that 35 bar, let's get everyone to 35, we're probably going to formally change that bar to 40. And part of that is we've been working, like lots of our clients, we've been working with them for 5+ years. So we kind of know what's possible there. I don't necessarily think it's going to stay at 40. Like I don't think we can predict 5 years' time. But for the next 3 years, we believe it's time to make hay. It is time to make hay. And let's say you get yourself into the mid-40s EBITDA and things get tough or change in 3 years' time, you'll be in a better place with a bigger buffer to handle that. we definitely think the next 3 years is an opportunity to speed up, not slow down.
The demographics, and we can come back to that, are just incredible. And we look at just the amount of new business that firms are writing, but just that supply and demand equation is, as you say, the opportunity and the threat. With the firms that we talk to, and we're, as part of our role, we're looking at how do we maximize efficiency for our customers. And we often talk about a roadmap where, customers can go from 100, servicing 100 client groups to 200, but without degrading the quality of advice or the service that they provide, because I think it's easy to get to 200, but the other two things drop off. Are the firms that you're working with and that you're seeing, it's about maximizing sort of that profitability, but also looking to grow the size of the firm at the same time?
I always say to people, don't work with us if you don't want to grow. Like, we'll get really frustrated, you'll get frustrated, and it's just an outcome of working on your business. But there is one other element to advisors who can take on more clients more efficiently and still have a great client experience. And the other element is the advisor experience. So we're very much around, what sort of life do you want to live? I think this is changing daily right now. I don't know. I don't have many clients who are at more than 140 clients per advisor who are enjoying it. Right. So that's kind of the maximum enjoyment level that I see right now. So the modeling that my coaches are doing with some clients are going, okay, well, we think we can get that to 180 and still be happy. Our history has always been, before you add clients, can we just, one, reprice, but also move up market? So our original client, who's still with us 11 years later, he just said to me, I just want more fees from fewer clients. It used to be on the back of my business card, more fees from fewer clients. So yeah, we're not necessarily the how do you get from 100 to 200 people. Probably how do you double revenue per advisor? For sure, we're those people, for sure, but not necessarily in client numbers. And I think that given AI, there is safety in moving up market to more complex clients. I think that is a safe move right now.
Speaking of AI, finally, we're seeing a big shift in technology adoption across the industry. One of the areas that I think has been really interesting is just the adoption of AI, file noting, and the workflows that can be created off the back of those file notes, whether that's SOA preparation, letters of engagement, etc. How far are you seeing your firms adopt and use AI? Is it still for what would be relatively simple tasks, but incredibly valuable as far as an unlock, or are they really starting to look at automation and robotics within their business?
We have both of those camps. We fall into the what problem are we trying to solve? So it's, we're very practical people. Absolutely, file noting is just this huge no-brainer. And that goes back to the problem we're trying to solve is to get anything that is not advice off our advisor's desk. When we couldn't hire coaches, we started we're probably very early in the automatic file noting and transcription. We've had that for years at Slipstream. But the need was I needed more coach capacity and I couldn't find new coaches. So we were just relentlessly trying to solve that problem, and AI for the win. Any advisor who's not currently using a file note option, I think that's a big win. We also have the people who are deep in the robotics. So probably we have more of those on the accounting side, like how do I do a BAS in one click kind of robotics. But we do have people who are super interested in that. I think, you remember, like Google used to do this, Google X, or I think all of Google, you got 20% of your time to work on interesting projects that don't necessarily have a short-term payoff. I would put a time frame. I say to my team, when you're working on like what if scenarios, I'm super keen for it. And it's for two reasons. One, it might work out and it might be exciting. The bigger reason for me is you are building capability. You're building personal capability. I don't mind those projects, but I definitely have got people who I'm like, hey, the main game's over here. There's $600,000 of a repricing project you've paused. And by pausing that, you're costing yourself $50,000 every month. So just be aware that the time you're investing in that is costing you $50,000 a month. So I don't need total ROI, but just like I wouldn't pause the project with a guaranteed payoff for this project that's really interesting. My question to you, and you're in a better chance to answer this, is there's so much innovation happening firm by firm. And there's this argument that's like, can we just leave this to the big guys?
I was going to go there and decided not to just because of time, but you're spot on. We've just been around the country listening to a whole lot of advisors and running listening groups, as well as chatting to a whole heap of people. I sort of say it sort of a bit tongue in cheek, but if say there's 12,000 advisors, there's 12,000 people building the same agents in their practice, which I love that people are curious and tinkering. but it also strikes me as a massive waste of time. So I think, and certainly that's where, we're putting a lot of focus at the moment. What are those things that people are trying to create individually across all their firms that we can actually do for them and leverage our balance sheet and our tech team? So 100% couldn't agree more.
My test around that, so what agents should we leave to the big guys, is the closer they are to the money, the closer they are to the cyber risk, just tinker around with things that if it broke, there's no catastrophic outcome. But there are things that I'm seeing people tinker with. I'm like, you can't put client data in there. You can't put client data in there.
Yeah.
So that's maybe my line. If you don't have a risk and compliance team internally, then you can leverage the risk and compliance and technology teams elsewhere.
Yeah. So security and trust has never been more important.
Yes.
We're going to run out of time very soon, but I did want to give you a bit of a plug. You've also recently launched your own podcast. Do you want to talk about that for a bit?
So my podcast is called High Agency, and I launched it this year. So I'm about to record episode 6. It's not a weekly podcast by any means. It's just I have lots of conversations with businesses, and they are not lacking in effort and they're not lacking in ambition, but they're often lacking in clarity and courage. And so high agency is really, it is that piece of like, what does good look like? I want people to know that you might have the right vehicle to achieve dreams that you don't even currently have. Like, you're probably in the right vehicle already and you have control. So it's that you have more control than you might currently realize. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily your control zone and your comfort zone are the same thing. So it is that courage. At the moment, it's a one-woman show, but it's built on the stories that we see every day in the work that we do with our 100 firms.
And is this part of you looking to scale what you do and maybe take it to the masses, or are you still very focused on that sort of high-touch service that you do provide today?
So I'm a never say never, but this would be the closest thing I'd say never to. So Slipstream is built on the fundamental idea that we are around to help a small number of people massively, not a massive number of people in a small way. So if I wanted to build a scalable business, I would have got into SaaS in 2010. So
probably lucky again.
Well, I think they've made some money. So our original big, hairy, audacious goal at Slipstream was to have 80 people who've engaged us tell us that we've changed their life forever. And now we're beyond that number. And that, like, not only is that what drives me, that's how I get the coaches, right? So yeah, we pay them really well. That's fine. It's more that they get to impact people's lives in such a way that their, families change, their retirement changes, the schools their kids go to change. So no, the podcast is not for that. It is literally, I speak on stages a lot, and people always come up to me and say, oh, I wish my business partner was here. And they go, oh, I wish this person was here. And I thought, okay, this is getting silly. I just need to do this on a different medium.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully we can get you on stage and you'll join us later in the year at our annual NetWealth Summit. But that's been a fantastic chat. Really appreciate your time, and I wish we'd done it sooner.
Oh, thank you so much for the invite, Matt. I love this podcast, so keep going even though it's hard.
Thank you. Great to catch up. Thanks for listening to this episode of Between Meetings. For more episodes and to subscribe to our series, visit the NetWealth website, iTunes, Spotify, or your favourite listening service. And if you want to contact me or engage or discuss any of the topics raised, please find me on LinkedIn or Twitter or send me a private message. We hope you can tune into the next episode.